my name is Miles, and today I'm going to read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer Stone, Chapter 2, The Vanishing Glass. Only 10 years had passed since the Dursleys had woken up to find their nephew on the front step, but Privet Drive had hardly changed at all. The sun rose on the same tidy front gardens and lit up the brass number floor on the Dursleys' front door and crept into the living room, which was almost exactly the same as it had been on the night when Mr. Dursley had seen the fateful news report about owls. The only photographs of mantelpiece really showed how much time had passed. 10 years ago, there had been a lot of pictures that would look like a large pink beach ball in different colored bonnets, but Dudley Dursley was no longer a baby, and now photographs showed a large blond boy riding his first bicycle on a carousel at the fair, playing a computer game with his father, being hugged and kissed by his mother, and the room held no sign at all that another boy lived in the house too. Yet Harry Potter was still there, asleep at the moment, but not for long. His Aunt Petunia was awake, and it was her shrill voice to make him the first day of the voice. Up! Get up! Now! Harry woke with a start. His aunt rapped on the door again. Up! She shrieked. Harry heard her walking toward the kitchen. He rolled onto his back and tried to remember the dream. It had been a good one. There was a flying motorcycle in it. He had a funny feeling he had the same dream before. His aunt was back outside the door. Are you up yet? She demanded. Nearly, said Harry. Well, get a move on. I want you to look after the bacon. And don't you dare let it burn. I want everything perfect for Daddy's birthday. Harry groaned. What did you say? His aunt snapped at the door. Nothing. Dudley's birthday. How could he have forgotten? Harry got slowly out of the bed and started looking for socks. He found a pair under his bed, and after pulling the spider off of one of them, put them on. Harry was used to spiders because the cupboard under the stairs was full of them, and that was where he slept. When he was dressed, he went down to the hall, into the kitchen. The table was almost hidden beneath all Dudley's presents. It looked as though Dudley had gotten a new computer he wanted, not to mention the second television and the racing bike. Exactly what Dudley wanted a racing bike was a mystery to Harry, as Dudley was very fat and hated exercise, unless of course involved punching somebody. Dudley's favorite punching bag was Harry, but he couldn't often catch him. Harry didn't look it, but he was very fast. Perhaps it had something to do with the living in the dark cupboard. But Harry had always been small and skinny for his age. He looked even smaller and skinnier than he really was, because all he had to wear was Dudley's old clothes, and Dudley was about 4 times bigger than he was. Harry had a thin face, knobby knees, black hair, and bright green eyes. He wore round glasses held together with a lot of scotch tape because of all the times Dudley had punched him on the nose. The only thing Harry liked about shaved own parents was a very thin scar on his forehead that was the shape of a lightning bolt, like a bolt of lightning. He had it as long as he could remember, and the first question he could ever remember asking his aunt how he got in it. In the car crash when your parents died, she had said. And don't ask questions. That was the first rule for a quiet life with the Dursleys. Uncle Vernon entered the kitchen as Harry was turning over the bacon. Come on, your Hale, he barked by the way of the morning greeting. About once a week, Uncle Vernon looked over the top of his newspaper and shouted that Harry needed a haircut. Harry must have had more haircuts than the rest of the boys in his class put together. But it made no difference. His hair simply grew that way all over the place. Harry was frying eggs by the time Dudley arrived in the kitchen with his mother. Dudley looked a lot like Uncle Vernon. He had a large pink face, but not much neck, small, watery blue eyes, and thick blonde hair that lay smoothly on his thick, fat head. Aunt Petunia often said that Dudley looked like a baby angel. Harry often said that Dudley looked like a pig in a wig. Harry put the plates of eggs and bacon on the table, which was difficult as there wasn't much room. Dudley, meanwhile, was counting his present. His face fit. 36, he said, looking at his mother and father. That's 2 less than last year. Darling, you haven't counted on Marge's present. See, it's here under this big one for Mommy and Daddy. All right, 37 then. And Dudley going red in the face. Here you could see a huge Dudley tantrum coming on. Begin wolfing down his bacon as fast as possible in case Dudley turned the table over. Aunt Petunia obviously scented danger too, because she said quickly, "And we'll buy you 2 other presents while we're out today." "How's that, Pumpkin? 2 more presents? Isn't that all right?" Dudley thought for a minute. Looked like hard work. Finally he said slowly, "So I'll have 39, sweet tums," said Aunt Petunia. "Oh," Dudley said, sat down heavily and grabbed the nearest parcel. "All right then." Uncle Vernon chuckled. "Little Tyke wants his money worth, just like his father." "Atta boy, Dudley." He ruffled Dudley's hair. At the moment the telephone rang and Aunt Petunia went to answer, while Harry and Uncle Vernon watched Dudley unwrap the racing bike, a video camera, and a remote control airplane, 16 new computer games, and a VCR. He was ripping the paper off a gold wristwatch when Aunt Petunia came back from the telephone looking both angry and worried. "Bad news, Vernon," she said. "Mrs. Figg broken her leg. She can't take him." She jerked her head at Harry's direction. Dudley's mouth fell open in horror. But Harry's heart gave a leap. Every year at Dudley's birthday, his parents took him and a friend out for the day to Venture Box, hamburger restaurants, or the movies. Every year he was left behind with Mrs. Figgs, a mad old lady who lived 2 streets away. Harry hated it there. The whole house smelled of cabbage, and Mrs. Figg made him look at photographs of all the cats she ever owned. "Now what?" asked Aunt Petunia, looking furiously at Harry as though he planned this. Harry knew he ought to feel sorry that Mrs. Figg had broken her leg, but it wasn't easy when he reminded himself that it would be a whole year before he had to look at the Temple's Snowy, Mr. Paws, and Tufty again. "We could phone Marge," Uncle Vernon suggests. "Don't be silly, Vernon. She hates the boy." The Dursleys often spoken about Harry like this, as though he wasn't there, or rather as though he was something very nasty that couldn't understand them, like a slug. "What about what's-her-name, your friend Vernon?" On a vacation in Majorca, snapped Aunt Petunia. "You could just leave me here," Harry put in hopefully. He would be able to watch what he wanted on the television for a change, and maybe have it go on Dudley's computer. Aunt Petunia looked as though she just swallowed. And come back and find the house in ruins, she snarled. I won't blow up the house, said Harry, but they weren't listening. I suppose we could take him to the zoo, said Aunt Petunia slowly, and leave him in the car. That car's new. He's not sitting in it alone. Dudley began crying out. In fact, he wasn't really crying. It would have been years since he really cried, but he knew if he screwed up his face and wailed, his mother would give him anything he wanted. Dinky dum-dums, don't cry. Mommy won't let him spoil your special day, she cried, flinging her arms around him. I don't want him to come, Dudley yelled between huge pretend sobs. He always spoils everything, he shot in very nasty gleam through the gap in his mother's arm. Just then the doorbell. Oh, good Lord, they're here, said Aunt Petunia faintly. And a moment later, Dudley's best friend, Percy Parkerkiss, walked in with his mother. Piers was a scrawny boy with his face like a rat, and was usually one of who held people's arms behind their back while Dudley hit them. Dudley stopped pretending to cry at once. Half an hour later, Harry couldn't believe his luck. He was sitting in the back of Dursley's car with Piers and Dudley on the way to the zoo. For the first time in his life, his aunt and uncle hadn't been able to think of anything else to do with him. But before they left, Uncle Ron had taken Harry aside. I'm warning you, he had said, putting his large purple face right up to close to Harry's. I'm warning you now, boy. Any funny business, any at all, and you'll be in that cupboard from now until Christmas. I'm not going to do anything, said Harry. Honestly, but Uncle Ron didn't believe him. No one ever did. The problem was strange things often happened around Harry, and it just no good telling the Dursleys he didn't make them happen. Once Aunt Petunia tried coming back from the barber's looking as though he hadn't been there at all, had taken a pair of kitchen scissors and cut his hair so short he was almost bald, except for his bangs, which she left to hide the horrible scar. Dudley had laughed himself silly at Harry, who spent a sleepless night imagining school the next day, where he was already laughed at for his baggy clothes and taped glasses, as it had been before Aunt Petunia had shirted it off. He had tried to explain that he couldn't. Next morning, however, he had gotten up to find his hair exactly as it had been before Aunt Petunia had sheared it off. He had given a week in his cupboard for this, even though he tried to explain that he couldn't explain how it had grown back. Another time, Aunt Petunia had been trying to force him into a reverting old sweater of Dudley's, brown with orange puffballs. The harder she tried to pull it over his head, the smaller it seemed to become, until finally it might have fitted a hand puppet, but certainly wouldn't fit Harry. Aunt Petunia had decided it must have shrunk in the wash, and to his great relief, Harry wasn't punished. Found on the roof of the school kitchens, Dudley's gang had been chasing as usual, when as much to Harry's surprise as anyone else's, While he was sitting on the chimney, the Dursleys had received a very angry mail from Harry's headmistress, telling him, as he shouted at Uncle Vernon through mistress, telling him that Harry had been climbing school buildings. But all he tried to do, as he shouted at Uncle Vernon through the locked door at his cupboard, was jump behind the big trash cans outside the kitchen doors. Harry supposed that a wind must have caught him in mid-jump. But today nothing was going to go wrong. It was even worth being with Dudley and Pierce to be spending the whole day somewhere that wasn't school, cupboards, or Mrs. Figg's cabbage-smelling living room. While he drove, Uncle Vernon complained to Aunt Petunia. He liked to complain about things, people at work, Harry, the council, Harry, the bank, and Harry were just a few of his favorite subjects. This morning it was motorcycles. Rolling around the Mantics, the young hoodlums, he said, as the motorcycle overtook them. I had a dream about a motorcycle, said Harry, remembering something. It was fine. Uncle Vernon nearly crashed into the car in front. He turned right around in his seat and yelled at Harry, his face like a gigantic beet with a mustache. Motorcycles don't fly! Dudley and Pierce sniggered. I know they don't. It was only a dream. But he wished he hadn't said anything. If there was one thing the Dursley hated more than asking, it was his talking about everything in the way it should have, no matter if it was in a dream or even a cartoon. They seemed to think he might get dangerous ideas. It was a very sunny Saturday, and the zoo was crowded with families. The Dursley bought Dudley and Pierce large chocolate ice creams at the entrance, and then, because the smiling lady in the van had asked Harry what he wanted before they could hurry him away, they bought him a cheap lemon ice pop. It wasn't bad either, he thought, licking it as they watched a gorilla scratching as its head looked remarkably like Dudley, except it wasn't blonde. Harry had the best morning he had in a long time. He was careful to walk a little way apart from the Dursleys so that Dudley and Pierce, who were starting to get bored with the animals, might by lunchtime wouldn't fall back on their favorite hobby of hitting him. They ate in the zoo restaurant, and when Dudley had a tantrum because his Knickerbocker glory didn't have enough ice cream on the top, Uncle Vernon bought him another one, and Harry was allowed to finish the first. Harry felt afterward that he have known it was all too good to last. After lunch, they went to the reptile house. It was cool and dark in there, with lit windows all along the walls. Behind the glass, of sorts of lizards and snakes were crawling and slithering over bits of wood and more. Dudley and Pierce wanted to see a huge, poisonous cobras and thick, man-crushing pythons. Dudley quickly found the largest snake in the place. It could have wrapped its body twice around Uncle Vernon's car and crushed it into a trash can. But at the moment, it didn't look like in the mood. In fact, it was fast asleep. Dudley stood with his nose pressed against the glass, staring at the glistening brown course. Make it move, he whined at his father. Uncle Vernon tapped at the glass, but the snake didn't budge. Do it again, Dudley ordered. Uncle Vernon rapped on the glass smartly with his knuckles, but the snake just snoozed on. This is boring, Dudley moaned. He shuffled away. Harry moved in front of the tank and looked intently at the snake. He wouldn't have been surprised if it had died, boredom himself. No company except stupid people drumming their fingers on the glass. Try to disturb it all day. It was worse than having a cupboard as a bedroom, where the only visitor was Aunt Petunia hammering on the door to wake you up. At least he got visit the rest of the house. The snake suddenly opened his beady eyes. Slowly, it raised his head until its eyes were level with Harry. It winked. Harry stared. Then he looked quickly around to see if anyone watched. They weren't. He looked back at the snake and winked too. The snake jerked his head toward the Uncle Vernon and raised his eyes to see it. It gave Harry a look that says, quite plainly, I get that all the time. I know, Harry murmured through the glass. Though he wasn't sure the snake could hear him. It must be really annoying. The snake nodded fiercely. Where do you come from, anyway? Harry asked. The snake jabbered its tail and lit at a little sign at the next to the glass. Harry peered at it. Boa Constrictor, Brazil. Was it nice there? He jabbed his tail at the sign again, and Harry read on. The specimen was bred at the zoo. Oh, I see. You've never been to Brazil. As the snake said, finally shout behind them. Dudley! Mr. Dursley, come and look. It's the snake. You won't believe it, what it's doing. Dudley came waddling toward them as fast as he could. Out of the way, you, he said, punching Harry in the ribs. Caught by surprise, Harry fell hard on the concrete floor. What came next happened so fast that no one saw it happen. 1 second, Piers and Dudley were leaning right up close to the glass. The next, they had leapt back with howls of horror. Harry sat up and gasped. The glass front of the Boa Constrictor tank had vanished. The great snake was uncoiling itself rapidly, slithering out onto the floor. People throughout the reptile house screamed and stared, running for the exit. As the snake slid swiftly past him, Harry could have sworn a low, hissing voice said, Brazil, here I come. Thanks, amigo. The snake of the reptile house was in shock. The keeper of the reptile house was in shock. But the glass, he kept saying. Where did the glass go? The zoo director himself made Aunt Petunia a cup of strong tea while he apologized over and over again. Piers and Dudley could only gibber. As far as Harry had seen, the snake hadn't done anything except snapping playfully at their heels as it passed. But by the time they were all back in Vernon's car, Dudley was telling them that how it had nearly bitten off his leg, while Piers was swearing that it had tried to squeeze him to death. But worst of all, for Harry at least, Piers calming down enough to say, Harry was talking to it. You weren't you, Harry? Uncle Vernon waited until Piers was safely out of the house before starting on Harry. He was so angry he could hardly speak. He managed to say, Go, cupboard, stay, no meals, before he collapsed into a chair and Aunt Petunia had to run to get him large brandy. Harry lay in his dark cupboard much late, wishing he had a watch. He didn't know what time it was, and he couldn't be sure that the Dursleys were asleep. Until they were, he couldn't risk sneaking into the kitchen for some food. He lived with the Dursleys almost 10 years, 10 miserable years, as long as he could remember, ever since he'd been a baby and his parents had died in the car crash. He couldn't remember sometimes when he strained his memory during the long hours in his cupboard, he came up with a strange vision, blindly flashed green light and a burning pain on his forehead. This was supposed the car crash, but he couldn't imagine where the green light came from. He couldn't remember his parents at all. His aunt and uncle had never spoke about them, and of course he was forbidden to ask questions. There were no photographs of them in the house. When he had been younger, Harry had dreamed and dreamed of unknown relation coming to take him away. But it never happened. The Dursleys were his only friends. That sometimes he thought, or maybe hoped, the strangers in the street seemed to know him. Very strange strangers they were, too. A tiny man in a violet hat had bowed to him once while out shopping with Aunt Petunia and Dudley. After asking Harry furiously if he knew the man, Aunt Petunia had rushed out of the shop without buying anything. A wild-looking woman dressed in all green had waved merrily at him once on a bus. A bald man in a very long purple cloak had actually shaken his hand in the street the other day and then walked away without a word. The weirdest thing about all these people, the way seemed to vanish the second Harry tried to get a closer look. At school, Harry had no one. Everybody knew that Dudley's gang hated odd Harry Potter in his baggy old clothes and broken glasses, and nobody liked to disagree with Dudley's gang. If you want to listen to Chapter 3 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, The Letters from No One, you'll have to get the next video.